this nation will rise up and live out the true meaning of its creed. We hold these truths to be self-evident, that all men are created equal.
So we're going to get started because we have our treat. All of this, this series has just been such a treat. So we're going to get started. And unlike the last three programs, well, like the last two, the first two, actually, I should say, because the last time we did this, I'd like to start with the land acknowledgement. We want to acknowledge that we gather, as we gather in Suffolk, well, in Long Island, that we on the traditional land of Indigenous people, past and present, and we honor with gratitude the land itself and the people who have stirred it throughout the generations. And this calls us to commit to continuing to learn how to be better stewards of the land we inhabit as well. I just wanted to start with that land acknowledgement. And I encourage you all to look into the Indigenous people and who started the land, who cultivated the land that you are inhabiting. Okay, and now from whence we came. So to thank you everyone for joining us this evening. This is the last part of the series. It was a 4-part series, From Whence We Came, Cultural Food and Candid Conversations. This actually, I share this every time, but just in case someone's new this evening, this actually, I wasn't motivated to start this from a conversation we were having with our students from the George Floyd incident. And this young man said that he didn't feel like he had anything to be proud of as an African-American male. And that struck me to my core. I was already committed to exploring and celebrating different cultures and history, but it was more kind of like more of a kick in the pants to do more. And from that, I said, well, we need to have more we need to have more discussions. We need to have more discussions about African-American history, because what people do not realize many times is that African-American history is, what do you hear there? American history. So many times people shut off when they hear Black history because they're thinking, well, that's just for Black people. But no, it's for everyone that's in this land, because you need to know, if you learn about history of America, this is the history you should know as well. So with that said, I don't want to take up too much time, because I could go on. Well, the people that know me they know I can go on and on. But thank you again for joining us. My name is Malika Bachi Lockhart. I am the Assistant Director of Campus Activities and Multicultural Affairs. I am joined today here by my colleague, my partner in crime, Christy Banks, who has her camera off, but she is the Assistant Director of Campus Activities. There she goes, she's waving with her lovely smile. Hey, sis. She is the Assistant Director of Campus Activities and Multicultural Affairs on the Grant Campus in Brentwood. And Jim Banks should be joining us soon. He is the college-wide Multicultural Affairs Coordinator. Okay, so now with the introductions done, and you kind of understand where I came from, what was the motivation behind this, we're going to start now. I'm going to read John Celestan's bio. He is the guest speaker tonight. He will be talking about athletes and activism. Okay. So John Celestan is the Director of Engagement at the Corporation for Broadcasting, CPB, where he leads programs, projects, and initiatives that aim to connect public media stations with the communities they serve. Before working at CPB, John has worked at Goodwill Industries International, overseeing a national youth mentoring program to assist less advantaged youth with high school completion and career exploration. From 2011 to 2015, John worked as the program coordinator for the Rutgers Future Scholars Program, where he oversaw the mentoring program connecting over 350 high school students with 100 Rutgers undergraduate students for weekly mentoring sessions. For 8 years, John worked as a color analyst for ESPN Regional Television and Comcast Sportsnet Philadelphia, covering Big East basketball and the Philadelphia 76ers, respectively. A professional basketball player in his former life, John was a member of the Los Angeles Lakers 2000 NBA championship team, where he played alongside NBA superstars Shaquille O'Neal and the late great Kobe Bryant. He also played professionally for teams in Germany, France, Italy, and Ukraine. In his spare time, John serves as a volunteer board member for Voices for Children Montgomery, a nonprofit organization that advocates for the timely placement of abused and neglected children in safe, permanent homes. He was recently elected to Alumni Board at his alma mater, Villanova University, and also is a member of the Villanova University Black Alumni Association. So, without further ado, let's hear it and give John a nice warm energy. I'm giving you the applause for everyone since everyone's on mute.
Yeah, let me unmute myself before I make a fool of myself. Well, first and foremost, thank you, everybody. I'm super excited to be here and join all of you today, to talk a little bit about athletes and activism. And anytime I can do something to inspire young people, it's always great for me. I've done a lot of work, with young people in high school and college, and not working with young people as much now. So I kind of missed having those conversations with youth and young adults. So for me, this was great, and I was so happy to be able to jump on. So let me share my screen really quickly, and I think Malika, you may have to. Let me see here if I can share, because it's not allowing me to share my screen here. Let me see here. One participant can share at a time. Only host.
I'm going to make you the host.
Make me the host, yes, and I'll be able to share.
Host with the most. There you go.
All right, awesome. Let's see here. Still not. Oh, there we go. Okay, there we go. Perfect. Perfect. All right, can y'all see my screen?
No.
Can't see the screen?
No.
How about now?
Yes.
All right, awesome. So first and foremost, I know we wanted to have a little bit of discussion about some cultural things, right? And originally, for those who don't know, well, none of you probably know this, maybe Jarvis may know this, Dr. Watson. Originally, I'm from New Orleans, Louisiana. I moved to Piscataway, New Jersey when I was 12 years old. And that's where me and Dr. Watson went to middle school together. So for me, gumbo is like a Louisiana tradition. My mom makes it every year during the holiday season. Gumbo is a combination of different meats, right? Turkey, shrimp, sausage, crab meat, all in a broth. Has anybody ever had gumbo? Somebody throw in the chat. I want to see if anybody on the call ever had gumbo before? The thing about gumbo, it's true diversity, and it celebrates diversity, right? So yeah, somebody said not the real stuff. You're right. You don't want to get fake gumbo. I'm telling you, you don't want it. You got to get it in New Orleans, right? But it celebrates diversity. It's what we're supposed to be as a country, really. Too bad that's not always the case, but I guess we're still a work in progress here in this country. But I will say this: when the pandemic dies, if you get a chance to travel down safely, get down to New Orleans, Essence Festival, Mardi Gras, Jazz Fest, Bayou Classic, even a New Orleans Saints game. My Saints, that's my favorite team, NFL team, for all my NFL fans here. Any day is good to go. To be honest with you, you don't have to go for a festival or something like that. But make sure you get you some gumbo when you go down. A po' boy sandwich as well. Those things right there, those are New Orleans traditions. So if any of you guys go down to New Orleans, give me a shout. And if you go down there and you don't get a gumbo, and you don't get some gumbo or a po' boy, I got to send you back because you just can't go without having that. So wanted to talk a little bit. Let's start with this. What is activism, right? That's the question we have before us here. The thing about activism is it's not monolithic, right? And what I hope for all of you to see today is that activism comes in many different forms. It's more than just marching for a cause, right? It's more than just pushing for legislative change. Sometimes it takes the form of civil unrest, right? There's all different forms of activism, but the truth is all the pieces matter, right? So we're gonna try to, I'm gonna roll with this definition for today, right? But what I want you to focus on is thinking about the intervening socially, politically, economically, environmentally, right? All these different ways you can be an activist. These are all different things that you can affect. And we'll talk about that as we move forward through the presentation today. So to me, there's no greater picture of activism among a group of athletes than this, right? Here you have Bill Russell, Muhammad Ali, Jim Brown, Kareem Abdul-Jabbar, all protesting for racial justice, and Muhammad Ali being inducted into the Vietnam War back in 1967. Ali refused to go, for those who don't know. Muhammad Ali refused to go. You have an argument here that these four guys really could all be the greatest players of all time in each of their sports. And here they are coming together as Black men back in 1967, right? So do y'all all know what it was like for Black people back in 1967? This is really like 1 year before Martin Luther King was assassinated in Memphis, Tennessee. 2 years after Malcolm X had been assassinated in 1965. These were scary times, yet these guys showed the courage to stand together as Black men and use their platforms, right? So I wanted to start with the old school because this is where it started, right? These guys did it and they allowed us to be able to stand and do the things that we do today. So this is Althea Neal Gibson, right? She was an American tennis player, professional golfer, one of the first Black athletes to cross the color line of international tennis. 1956, she became the first African-American to win a Grand Slam title, the French Championships. Sometimes activism is just doing you, just being great at something, right? I'm not sure if Althea even thought of herself as an activist, but sometimes you're an activist even when you're not trying to be, right? Most of you should know this guy, and if you don't, you should look him up, right? This is Jackie Robinson, where he was the guy who broke the color line in Major League Baseball. First African-American ever to play in the major leagues, right? Started at first base for the Brooklyn Dodgers. How many of you guys seen the movie 42? The late, great Chadwick Boseman played him in that film, right? But you got to think about it. This is social. This is social activism, right? Changing the landscape. Somebody like Jackie Robinson laid the groundwork for the rest of African-American players to complete a Major League Baseball and in many other sports. This is my guy right here. This is my guy. Favorite player of all time, the Magic Man, right? Me and my dad, we sat around many days watching Magic Johnson go to work. And Magic Johnson, to this day, is my hero. As Malika told you all, I had the opportunity to play for the Los Angeles Lakers. And I remember when I first got there, one of the first people I met was Magic Johnson. And let me tell you something. My dad, when I brought him home a picture of me and Magic Johnson, that was probably the proudest day of my life. When my dad saw me standing next to Magic Johnson, he couldn't believe it because we grew up watching this guy. But one of the reasons why I love Magic Johnson is not just how great he was as a basketball player, right? It was the things that he did off the court, even after he retired, right? Now, I want you to remember that definition, right? Promote, impede, direct, or intervene in social, political, economic, or environmental reform, right? With the desire to make changes in society toward a perceived greater good, right? Magic Johnson Enterprises, net worth, 700 million. Magic Johnson has a production company, a promotional company. He did have Magic Johnson Theaters back in the day, nationwide chain of movie theaters, right? That he sold to Lowe's Cineplex in 2004. Magic Johnson Entertainment, a film studio. Aspire, that's a cable television network launched in 2012, featuring programming targeting Black audiences, right? It's similar to like BET and TV One, right? Magic built businesses in Black neighborhoods. His movie theaters hired Black workers. He had 125 Starbucks. He was one of the first people to put Starbucks in Black neighborhoods, right? You see, he was about economic reform, but that's activism. That's activism. And I think sometimes that's overlooked because Magic Johnson wanted to make a difference, right? Sometimes activism, I would say, has consequences. And you know, it just comes with the territory. It just comes with the territory. How many people, anybody on this call knows who this guy is? Quick look. Anybody? Throw it in the chat. Throw it in the chat if you know who it is. I just want to see if anybody can just take a quick look at him and know who he is. Ah, we got some veterans here. We got some veterans, right? There you go. Somebody put John Thomas. No, John Thompson, get it right. Okay, okay. John Thompson. John Thompson. Here's a guy who, a two-time former NBA champion, the first Black coach to win an NCAA championship. I thought about him because I'm reading his book right now, I Came as a Shadow. He walked off the court to protest a rule that was called Proposition 42. This was the stand that he took sometime in the 80s. This was a rule that would disallow athletes who didn't meet NCAA academic qualifications from being able to attend universities, right? So Coach Thompson felt as if the rule disproportionately affected Black athletes and students from poor neighborhoods who didn't have the resources and the schools that could prepare them on the same level as those from wealthy backgrounds. So because he walked off the court and refused to coach the game, the NC ended up getting rid of Prop 42 and they installed Prop 48, which allowed students to be able, that didn't qualify to still be able to receive a scholarship, but they would sit out athletically their first year when they came to the school. They would get acclimated to the academic rigors of a university, right? So John Thompson did that when he was at Georgetown, the height of his career. But for standing up, he was labeled by many in college basketball as a racist, not liking white players. The rumors made it hard for him to recruit white players after that. You know, he was labeled a troublemaker, all of these things, but he stood up. So I just wanted to make sure that you guys understood what John Thompson did. And I'm going to drop this, see if I can drop this link so you guys can potentially check this out later. If you want to learn a little bit more about John Thompson, you can check out this link. Talks about the night, I just threw it in the chat, when he walked off the court. And it really changed college basketball. But I'm reading this book, I Came as a Shadow. Anybody interested in him should check it out because it is phenomenal. It is phenomenal. It talks about everything from how he recruited Allen Iverson to Patrick Ewing back in the day, to him being an African-American coach at Georgetown, and all the things that he went through and what he wanted to do from a social justice standpoint. One of the greatest of all time. So this guy on the left is Craig Hodges. I hope I don't have to tell you guys who the guy on the right is. I just want to make, wait a minute. I just want to make sure. We know who the guy on the right is, right? I don't have to tell y'all, right? Okay, just want to make sure. Just wanted to make sure. But a lot of people don't know about Craig Hodges, who this guy is. So Craig Hodges was one of the most prolific shooters in NBA history. And we're still talking about consequences here. Consequences when sometimes you stand up and you want to be an activist, right? He won the three-point shooting contest 3 years in a row, 1990, 1991, 1992. He even criticized his teammate Michael Jordan for not being more vocal on political issues. He was a devout Muslim. This is him right here. He wore dashiki to the White House after they won the championship when they visited in 1992. Y'all see him right there shooting the jump shot, right? He gave a handwritten letter to President George W.H. Bush, the first Bush, not the son, highlighting some of the inequities in Black neighborhoods across America. He was out of the league the next year, never played another minute in the NBA. Y'all heard me? He was out of the league the next year, never played another minute in the NBA, right? So sometimes there's consequences, but you got to be willing. You got to be willing to risk it all. This was social, political, right? Craig Hodges, one of the best ever shooters. This guy, one of the greatest scorers in college basketball history, prolific shooter as well. Another NBA player that converted to Islam from Christianity and changed his name in 1990. He was formerly known as Chris Jackson. His name now is Mahmoud Abdul Rauf. He was Colin Kaepernick before Colin Kaepernick, right? He refused to stand for the national anthem because of religious and political beliefs. He believed that the Quran forbade him to participate in nationalistic rituals. He believed the American flag was a symbol of oppression and tyranny. He was suspended by the NBA for not standing for the flag on March 12, 1996. He got traded to the Sacramento Kings, and then he was out of the league 2 years later. Now, everybody in the NBA knows he was still a lethal scorer. I knew for sure, you know why? Because I played against him in Europe in 2003. And guess what? He dropped 30 points on me. And I remember as I was guarding him, I'm thinking, this guy belongs still in the NBA. He's a great player, but was out of the league because of his activism, social, political. He's 50 years old now. You guys heard of the Ice Cube's league, the Big Three? Anybody watch that? The Big Three? You can check him out there. He's still killing cats, dominating guys at 50 years old. Check him out if the Big Three gets back rolling once the pandemic, dies down. But a great scorer. I think somebody's trying to get into you. I may want to let somebody in. I'm looking at somebody in the waiting room. Mahmoud Abdul Rauf. So let's move on. This is heavy basketball right now. We're going to get to some other sports. I don't want y'all to think it's all basketball, but heavy. One of my favorite college basketball teams of all time, right? The Fab Five. And here's another thing I'm going to do. I'm going to throw this into the I'm going to throw this hyperlink in as well. If you guys want to check a little bit out about the Fab Five as we move forward, because this right here, this team, man, I grew up on this basketball team. But check it out. NCAA basketball back then in the early 90s was more of a clean-cut game, right? Follow the rules, no showboating, listen to your coach, don't offend anyone, right? And here come these brash, confident, cocky freshmen. They come onto the scene. This is also the golden era of hip hop, or so I think. Some of y'all may disagree, right? Golden era of hip hop, early 90s, when hip hop was taking over. Baggy clothes are taking over. We all wanted the long shorts, right? You guys wearing tighter stuff now. Now it's tight shorts again, short shorts. But when we were coming up, everybody wanted the baggy shorts, the long shorts. These guys brought that onto the scene. They even wore black socks, which was unheard of back then in some games. Black shoes, black socks, bald heads to protest for a few games. It was like they were protesting against the establishment, right? Who all said these urban kids are coming in ruining college basketball, right? They kicked in the door. They said, we're gonna do things our way. Hip hop, brash, have fun. We're gonna be free. We're not gonna be what you want us to be, right? Again, these guys were branded thugs, hoodlums, bad for college basketball, etc. Sound familiar, right? They were activists. And I'm not sure they were even trying to be activists, right? Again, this is what it was all about. And during that time, we were going away from the little shorts, the little John Stockton shorts. We wasn't having that. No. It was about the long, baggy shorts. They brought that in. And remember, again, they were labeled thugs, hoodlums, hooligans, right? Well, look at them now. Check out the guys now. Chris Webber, 5-time NBA All-Star, TNT. You guys probably watch him all the time. He runs the Time Out Foundation, right? Which is a foundation that helps inner city youth, right? Jaylen Rhodes, 13 years in the NBA. You guys see him all the time, probably on ESPN. NBA analyst. He runs the Jaylen Rhodes Leadership Academy in Detroit, a charter school that has done phenomenal work. I think LeBron James kind of tailored his school, which we're going to talk about in a little bit after him. Juwan Howard, 19-year NBA career, 2-time NBA champion, coaches the University of Michigan right now. Ray Jackson, CEO of his own moving company, runs a nonprofit organization called Rise Up for inner city youth in Austin, Texas. Jimmy King, 2-year NBA career, vice president of True Champions, organization that helps student athletes get scholarship offers. All these guys that they labeled thugs, hoodlums back in the day. So that was then, right? So let's talk about now. What about now? What athletes do you all consider activists now? I want y'all to drop some names in the chat. Drop some names in the chat of who you all may think is activists, athletes that you can think of right now that you remember. LeBron James, I see. Who else? Anybody else? That's the only one. D Wade, I see somebody. Any others? Only basketball players? Nobody else? Michael Jordan. You laugh out loud. I wouldn't laugh. I wouldn't laugh. I could talk a little bit about Michael Jordan, some things that he's done. Doesn't always get the credit for being an activist. But I think he has done some things. He's not in my presentation, but remind me to talk about Michael Jordan as well. Sue Bird, Jarvis Watson, Sue Bird, Serena Williams. Any others? Any others? Naomi Osaka. All right. Tiger Woods. So let's talk about a few of them. Let's talk about right now. Maybe, you know what? I'm not even gonna say maybe. The greatest tennis player of all time, right? She's one that just by doing her thing in a majority white sport, a wealthy white sport that broke down barriers socially, right? Golf, tennis, these are all like the country club type sports where many times people of color, especially African Americans, they weren't welcome, right? And she became maybe the greatest. Now, let me stop saying maybe. She is the greatest of all time, right? But she didn't stop there. All the different things that she's spoken out on, right? Gender pay equality, Black Lives Matter movement, if you follow her on Twitter. With her sister, she's part owner of the Miami Dolphins and the first African-American woman to ever own an NFL team, excuse me. Again, that's social, political, economic activism. Y'all mentioned her, right? Naomi Osaka. Following in the footsteps of Serena, right? If Serena is the best tennis player ever, I would say Naomi is the best tennis player on the planet right now, right? Now, think about this. At only 23 years old, she is the most marketable athlete. She's one of the most marketable athletes in the world, right? She's ranked 8th among all athletes in endorsement income in 2020. She was the highest female athlete of all time by annual income in 2020. 2020 Sportsman of the Year because of her activism. With all that on the line, she showed absolute courage wearing those face masks with the names of 7 Black Americans who have been murdered by both police and civilians. Breonna Taylor, Elijah McClain, Ahmaud Arbery, Trayvon Martin, George Floyd, Philando Castile, Tamir Rice. She didn't have enough matches or masks to even wear them all, right? But powerful that she put it all on the line in her early 20s, right, for injustice. That's huge. That's big, man. Now, it's an important picture right here. On the left is former Senator Kelly Loeffler, who was the owner of the WNBA's Atlanta Dream, one of the owners. On the right is one of the new owners of the Atlanta Dream, Renee Montgomery. And this is what I'm gonna do. I'm gonna throw this in the chat for you all as well. If you want to learn a little bit more about this story a little bit later. But here's what's interesting. Here is a woman in Renee Montgomery, who was a two-time WNBA champion. Here's a young woman who sat out the 2020 season to do more important work in social justice, advocacy, reform, right? She led the push to banish Kelly Loeffler, who came out against the players in the WNBA who wanted to speak out for the Black Lives Matter campaign, right? She just hated all over that, right? So through collective action, the WNBA's 144 players competing in the 2020 season, they backed one of Loeffler's Democratic opponents. I think it was the Reverend Raphael Warnock, and Loeffler was defeated in the January runoff and down there in Georgia, and it ousted her from her Senate seat. And it helped Democrats successfully take control of the US Senate. But check this out. 1 month later, Renee Montgomery became one of the 3 new owners of the Atlanta Dream. That's big time. That, when you talk about activism and athletes, that right there, that's one of the most impressive ones I read about. That is big time. I don't have to introduce this guy. Arguably, I did say arguably, right? The greatest basketball player of all time, right? I don't need to tell any of you about his NBA accomplishments. So I won't even waste your time. I won't even list any of that. You won't even see him here, right? But here's what he is doing outside of basketball, all right? Think about this: social, political, economic. LRMR is his marketing company that helps to market professional athletes. He created this with his childhood friends, all African-American men who have stormed the industry, mostly dominated by white men. And they've done a tremendous job with their marketing company, right? The I Promise School, a public elementary school in Akron, Ohio. And let me see if I think I got a link for that as well. I'm gonna throw this link in the chat if you guys wanna learn a little bit about the I Promise School, right? But the I Promise School, again, Akron, Ohio, 2018, he opened it. It's supported by LeBron James's Family Foundation. The school is specifically aimed at at-risk children, STEM-based curriculum, a family resource center. The school's open from 8 to 5, longer hours, right? He has his More Than a Vote campaign, right? Where Black athletes and artists work together to combat systematic racist voter suppression. His company, Spring Hill Media Company, that has produced some great pieces of work. Let me see. Have any of you seen what's this documentary? Shut Up and Dribble. Have you guys seen that? I'll throw that. If you haven't, I'm gonna throw something in the chat for you to learn a little bit about that. Tremendous documentary. I think it was on Showtime, right? But it was produced by his media company. There's another show. It's called The Shop on HBO. Has anybody seen that? HBO. I'm gonna throw a link for that in the chat as well. The Shop on HBO. LeBron is doing a tremendous job with that show, right? It brings on athletes, comedians, politicians, business owners, entertainers to talk about life, social justice, businesses. It's a dope show, man. It's a dope show. And if you haven't watched it, go check it out. But here are all the things that LeBron James is doing off the court, making a difference socially, politically, economically, right? Again, it's more than just marching, which is a piece of it too. But there are a lot of different things that you can do when it comes to being an activist. from an athlete perspective. How many of you guys know about this? Russell Westbrook, he's also getting into the media game, right? Westbrook has long ties with the state of Oklahoma. I can't remember how many years he played for the OKC Thunder, but I know it was a lot of years, right? Now he's producing a documentary about Black Wall Street. Anybody know about Black Wall Street? Anybody know the history about Black Wall Street, right? African-American neighborhood in, what town is it in Kansas? I'm sorry, Tulsa, Oklahoma, excuse me. You know, businesses, lawyers, doctors, and was burnt to the ground by racist white folk who were angry about Black progress, right? But awareness through the media, right, about this country's history is what we have to make sure we do. And as a community, we need to understand that we did create something great, and it was taken from us by jealousy, hate, and evil. This story is not told enough. I know it's starting to get a little more publicity, but for many years, I had never heard of a Black Wall Street and what happened in Tulsa. So excited and was so happy to see Russell Westbrook being involved in this. And I know he's putting this together, and it's going to air on the History Channel pretty soon. Again, the WNBA and the NBA, they've done a tremendous job when it comes to the social justice, being activists, really using their platform. NFL, not so much, right? But the NBA and WNBA, they, to me, have been very active. And I've been so excited and very proud that I once played in the NBA, and proud of all the men and women who are doing such great things when it comes to being active from a social, political, and even an economic standpoint. I failed to highlight economic here, but from all those standpoints. Any of you guys think the NBA isn't doing the best job when it comes to all three sports? Anybody think another sport is doing a better job than what the NBA and WNBA has done? Y'all don't have to agree with me. You can tell me why I'm a fool, right? No? Everybody agrees? Everybody agrees? All right. What more can we say about this guy? I'm not sure we are even having this discussion today in present times without this guy, right? He laid it all on the line and basically sacrificed his career for us, right? For many of you, me, did not stand as a silent protest against police brutality happening in so many Black and brown neighborhoods in America, right? And they tried to make it about the flag. They tried to make him unpatriotic, was torn to shreds for it, and then began taking a knee instead. This led to the gesture being done not only across all across America, but really all across the world. He was crucified. He was crucified, right? For standing up for me and you. Crucified. Cap has never played another down in the NFL. But what he has done is he's been super active from an activism standpoint, right? He started the Know Your Rights campaign, an organization which held free seminars to disadvantaged youth to teach them self-empowerment, American history, and legal rights. The NFL owners were against many of their players speaking out for racial justice, so as not to upset the fans, right, who didn't want to see this type of stuff, right, during a football game. Well, if you've noticed, the NFL has kind of switched its stance now after seeing how the NBA has embraced their players for being outspoken and really has apologized for the treatment of their players, but they still have not officially apologized to Colin Kaepernick. It's a shame, isn't it? Here's a guy I know well. His name is Etan Thomas. He's a friend of mine, doesn't live too far from me, actually, about 20 minutes here in Maryland. He and I played against each other when he was at Syracuse University and I at Villanova. Etan played in the NBA for many teams over his 11-year career. He is the epitome of an athlete who is a social activist. He even wrote a book, as you can see here, about athletes and activism, right? I have it. I have yet to read it yet, but I hear the book is great. Dwayne Wade, Kareem Abdul-Jabbar, Russell Westbrook, Carmelo Anthony, Bill Russell, all are in this book, right? So check it out if you get a chance. Check it out, because basically, he's basically talking exactly about what we're talking about today. And somebody just asking who's working on the Tulsa documentary. That's Russell Westbrook. He's working on that. It's going to be on the History Channel. He's the producer of the documentary, or he's the executive producer of the documentary. But again, social, political, Eton Thomas. Okay, check out this book if you get a chance. So, I was thinking if I had to like have a GOATs, right, the greatest of all time when it came to activism. And you guys don't have to agree with me. This is just my list, right? When I try to think about what people have done, right? Didn't talk about Tommy Smith and John Carlos in that upper left-hand corner. They laid it all on the line. Everybody knows the historic picture, right? They laid it all on the line back in the 1968 Olympics. And you know what? Their career suffered after that. When they did it, it was only months after the assassination of Dr. Martin Luther King, and the protests against the Vietnam War were starting to gain steam, excuse me. What people sometimes fail to realize is that they wore black socks without shoes as well when they were on that podium to bring attention to Black poverty. They wore beads around their necks to protest lynching. And they raised the black gloved fist to represent solidarity and support with Black people and other oppressed people all around the world, right? They did that back then. Jesse Owens, the only picture up here in the black and white. Didn't talk about him. 4-time gold medalist in the 1936 Summer Olympics in Germany. This was back when Hitler was around, and he had this myth that white people were mentally and athletically superior to Black people, right? Jesse Owens won 4 gold medals in that Olympics, shattered the myth, opened doors for other Black athletes to get the respect that they deserve. Not talked about a lot, but Jesse Owens, to me, is one of the GOATs. And you guys see the rest of them up there. Obviously, Muhammad Ali, one of the greatest of all time, if not the greatest of all time when it comes to activism. What he stood for, the courage that he showed in the prime of his career, it was just phenomenal. Muhammad Ali and some of the others that we already talked about. So I wanted to put this here. And I say this because here's the question, and I'm going to probably ask you all this question. Do athletes have a responsibility to be activists, right? Charles Barkley had a commercial way back in the day where he said, I'm not a role model. Just because I dunk a basketball doesn't mean I should raise your kids, right? And you know what? This may sound crazy after this whole presentation I just gave, but I kind of agree. Being an activist as an athlete is a choice, right? Just because you're an athlete and you can jump, you can run, you can dunk, you can tackle, doesn't mean you should shoulder the load for America and their issues. Now, me, I would definitely be an activist as an athlete. I've spoken up and I've done a lot of those things. I consider myself an activist. But should athletes be the ones to be responsible for making social change in society, right? That's a question I wanted to ask you all. And I'm gonna open it up. I want to open it up to have some conversation to see what you guys think. Do athletes have a responsibility to be activists? Please unmute yourselves. I want to hear.
Can I answer the question?
Definitely.
Okay. I would say the reason why athletes have the responsibility is because that's the segment of our population that gets the light shine. So in other words, if you're in a situation where people are listening to you and they see you, then I think you have an obligation to let things happen. Because of that, I think that's why. And also activists by definition now you know, they're some of our most intelligent people. And I think that we should give them credit for that.
Okay. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Yes,
Daniel, appreciate that.
yes, I was wondering if I could speak to it also. I love to see athletes like Muhammad Ali, you know, represented from the heart that really understood what he was doing. I just think that when we have so many of athletes that are in front of the true activists, then it can become a problem. You know, we're being led by entertainers now. And yes, we can get positivity out of people who have a lot of notoriety because of you know, they're entertainers, but we can't get duped at the same time to think that, you know, the people that really have their ear to the pulse and their, you know, their heart on the pulse of this thing should be at the forefront of the movement.
Appreciate that. Neftali, I see you raised your hand.
Thank you, sir. And sorry that my my screen is not on. I'm actually still working and I'm running around doing a lot of stuff, but
Dedication. You're showing dedication.
I appreciate that. I just felt it was very important to be on this call, and just kind of just to add to what the gentleman just mentioned. Me personally, I feel we all should burden that load. And the reason why I say that is, you know, I consider myself a quiet leader. And I don't necessarily, and by the way, I don't know if I'm right or wrong, right? I struggle with this every day as the athletic director here at the college. And I know it's bigger than me, and I know that I'm at a point where I'm not just representing myself anymore as the athletic director. I'm also representing the 360 student athletes that partake in athletics. So going back to my point, I try to lead by example, right? I try to lead, and I tell my athletes all the time, you're always going to be judged by those moments when people are not looking. You know, what are you doing then behind closed doors when people might think it doesn't matter? So I think the point I'm trying to make is that by leading by example, by trying to treat people with respect, not necessarily being that activist that talks, but more of that activist that just leads by example, is how I try to carry on day in and day out. Now, is that right or wrong? I don't know, but I do struggle with that every day. Am I doing enough to be that activist? Because I have the stage, and I think athletes have the platform, and it becomes a little bit easier for them because they have the platform. They're in front of TVs, they're in front of the media, so it's easier for them to be that activist versus an individual like myself who I might not have that same platform, but I think I have the platform here locally, you know, here at Suffolk. So, I mean, I'll leave it at that. But I will tell you that I do struggle with how much am I doing and am I doing enough?
Okay. What about athletes who, oh, before I go forward, does anybody else want to touch or share their opinion on that?
I agree with Neff, and someone else said earlier in the chat that I think we all have a responsibility. My dad always told me there's an equation in life. You're either part of the solution or you're part of the problem. And as this great woman to my left, Shirley Chisholm, said, you know, service is the rent we pay for living on this earth.
That's right. I heard that.
That, you know, how do we expect to leave the earth greater than when we came for the people that come after us if we don't take some responsibility in that? So that's my response.
Okay. What if you're an athlete and you're not passionate about activism? Do you think, what if you just want to shut up and dribble? You know, what if that's all? Should those athletes be maligned because they're not involved in social justice issues? Anyone? Well, go ahead. Who raised their hand? Let me see. 2 participants raised their hand. Please unmute yourself. We can all just talk now.
Yes, I think that they should just shut up and dribble, and be supportive. Don't get in the way. That's the problem. They got white funders that have ulterior motives that a lot of times these people get in the way of the people who may not have as much notoriety. If they can step aside, do what they're great at, be a great example. I mean, we shouldn't be following them all the way for example. I don't think we should hoist all of that on their shoulders to be the parents of the children. But if they can be a great example and they're at the forefront, that's the best thing possible. Don't get in the way. That's what I would say.
Good point. Can I say something? Being that we're talking about activism, back in the 1960s, I was one of those athletes that was part of the conversation about boycotting the 1968 Olympics in Mexico City. Now, with the AAU at that time to try to get the athletes not to go that direction, they called on Jesse Owens. They figured if he were to use his popularity and his history, that would help, get people away from boycotting the Olympics. And of course, at that time, he caught a lot of help for trying to do that.
Wow. Wait, he caught a lot of hell for not participating in the boycott?
No. But he was trying to tell the athletes to go to the Olympics. So he was
go to the Olympics, right?
So Kareem Jabbar, no, you need to go because America, and
Right.
the rest of the population thought that basically he was not doing the right thing in terms of black people.
Okay, I got it. But can you think about, from his point of view, think about if he wouldn't have went to those Olympics in Germany, because by going to the Olympics, he shattered the myth that Black athletes were less than, right? So he probably looked at it from that standpoint, by you can do more by being there and winning. But I get why some people said, no, we shouldn't even represent.
Yeah, but you know what, John? If you think about back then, before going to the Olympics, he was considering boycotting the Olympics because there was some black folks felt like we weren't being recognized, and he was backing down until his coach kind of cursed him out. So basically, he understands the role of activism and being aware. But I think by that time, I think the AAU was paying him money because economically he really wasn't doing that well. So I think that he was getting paid by the AAU. AAU was the amateur athletic union that was the number one sporting organization.
Right. Got it.
I think that by default, I didn't even know that fact that the brother was just shedding on it. But I think by default he did myth. I respect Jesse Owens a lot, for that myth. Just destroying that myth that Hitler and the whole German regime was trying to push at that time. But at the same time, like if you go to Jackie Robinson, like a lot of our progress was, shaking how many jobs and the resources that was led away from the Black community when they left the Negro leagues and went into the majors, and we had our own leagues where, there's so many, and we were better players, actually. It was more exciting players and everything. So if we just controlled some of the, when we think about what we should do, if a lot of us understood, if we can just control what we dominate in numbers, man, we wouldn't even have the economic issues that we're talking about. And that's what I mean by like certain athletes getting in the way. And then we not knowing better, we uplift, Jackie Robinson on a certain level where, I don't know if we, the knowledge, people who are conscious about what happened, I don't know if we should put them on that type of pedestal because it was detrimental, so.
Good point.
Anybody else?
So this is Gail, and I just wanted to add, so it's, it's such a complex question because, we can all have, be activists in different ways. And so whether you boycott something or you find another way to protest, I remember, and I'm going to localize this a bit for us because some years back at the college, I want to say it was the men's baseball team made it to the World Series. And this is when the whole marriage equality issue was, prominent in society, American society. And so there was this question, do they boycott? Should the team go? Should the team not go? And so there was a lot of discussion about it because athletes, people felt differently, and what's the answer? And so I had many conversations with people because you don't want to lose that opportunity of getting to play in the World Series, but is there something else that you could do that would help take a stand, which is often, these other methods that you shared tonight, John, which are great because yet the person still gets to compete, but yet they still use this platform to bring attention to it. So I think it's really, interesting, and there's no right or wrong answer, right? People just have different ways of looking at things, and they have to, whatever they're comfortable with, I think, is one of the things people have to decide on their own.
Got it. Okay. Thank
So
you,
I'm
Gail.
curious when sports come back at the college, how will we feel about athletes and their activism, right? And it's not really up to us, it's really up to the athletes and how they want to, don't you think, or no? Or are we going to tell them they have to, do certain things?
Set up and dribble, right?
See, I struggle with, as much as, again, I would be an activist and that's my choice, right? I just struggle with, I feel like like America, sometimes our politicians and our people that are in legislation, and they get a pass. You know what I'm saying? Like, so the athletes, the athletes aren't the only ones with high profiles. And I'm not saying that athletes shouldn't protest. I just don't like the pressure being on athletes to have to make the change, because it just, for me, seems like a cop-out to the rest of the country that honestly have more important jobs than athletes. With that said, I do understand the platform and I do understand being on the stage, but like someone said here, not everybody is ready for that stage. And we don't just want everybody out there running their mouth, because that could be, it could be counterproductive in some capacity. I did want to bring up Michael Jordan because there's been a lot of conversation over the years about Michael Jordan not doing enough from an activist standpoint, not doing enough for African Americans, not standing up for social issues. One thing that I've noticed, and I did not include Michael Jordan in my presentation only because I just ran out of time. I didn't want to, have too many slides here. But I do know Michael Jordan has been doing a lot of things as of late when it comes to healthcare in low-income communities. He's been building a lot of local healthcare, sites. Some down there in North Carolina. I'm not sure exactly. You all can probably Google this, but there's been at least 2 projects that he's financed over the last couple of years to give access to healthcare to people who normally don't have great healthcare resources. So I wanted to kind of talk about Michael Jordan and see how some of you feel about him as an activist or not, what he's done from a social justice standpoint. Should he do more?
Hey, Brother John, this is Brother Jarvis. How you doing, man?
Brother Watson, how you doing, John?
Good to have another Piscataway brother on here, man. It's good,
right.
man. Good to see you, brother. Thank you
Good
for
to
being
see you
here.
too. Thank you for having me, Jarvis.
Nah, to your point, Michael. I remember when we were growing up, Michael Jordan really didn't give off that Black Power, activist type of role, but we looked at him as the one breaking the barrier, so to speak, because of he was owning his own brand. How many people did you actually knew other than like Jerry West, who actually had a logo that was actually generating money? So and then to this day, people still are talking about, I got the new Jordans, and he hasn't bounced the ball I don't know how long, So in certain aspects, he was the one who was the one who's doing it for us. But what we were lacking, I think, at some point, you know, even with hip hop, you never saw like Jordan really, you know, talk about like, you know, Black Power or things like that. So it was kind of hard to connect with him at a particular point, especially when a lot of brothers would be getting killed and getting robbed over his sneakers. And there was really nothing we heard from Michael Jordan, like, you know, I'm gonna reduce the amount of money, or hey, y'all stop the violence kind of stuff. You never saw him on like, you know, self-destruction. For those of y'all we're talking about hip hop, self-destruction was a collaboration of all these hip hop artists talking about we need to stop killing each other. And so I had a mixed feeling, other than the fact that I was a Knicks fan, and he's always destroyed the Knicks. But
heartache.
So I had like a really weird kind of connection with Jordan. I loved seeing him play and things like that. But I wish there was a little bit more that he was doing, even when I was growing up, to be more like the Muhammad Ali's, the Jim Browns, and things like you talked about. Yeah.
You know what? I understand what you're saying, but sometimes we have to look at who really tell us who our leaders are. So Jordan has been doing a lot. He's been quiet. I think that when we look at Dr. Martin Luther King, we never said King was our leader. The press said that, and then all said, yeah, I think he is our leader. So I think sometimes we expect to see things in the media to let us know who we should be looking at, or whatever the case may be. If you look at Aretha Franklin, you know, if you look at the things that she was doing back during the civil rights movement, people say, she didn't do it so much, but she did. So I think that in Jordan's case, to be fair to him, that he didn't need to be in the spotlight to do what he had to do, or what he was doing.
Yeah, I mean, I think you're 100% on that one. I think that we put our athletes and entertainers at a disadvantage, and we put them in a vulnerable position when we think that they should also represent our leader, because there's people that's invested in them, and an image that if they deviate from that, you know, there's heavy consequences that we're not strong enough as a community to protect these people. So there's a lot of people that got their careers taken from them. You mentioned Cap, but and that's 2020. Imagine what was happened to certain athletes back in the 60s and the 80s, whatever the case is, that came out, you know, on that heavy
tip.
Very true. So I think we really put them in a disadvantage. I think if they could support somebody that they felt was real and authentic, you know, they got the fund. They can't even put their funds into certain people because there's people watching where they put their funds at.
Yeah, I agree. Yeah,
so we gotta really understand this, and then we don't need leaders at this point. A lot of other groups of people don't even have leaders. They just know what's in their best interest. They have a cultural continuity. They got a glue that holds them together. They don't even have to get up on the ladder and tell each other what to do. They already know what to do. They tells them what to do. You know, we expecting athletes to do that for us, like LeBron James. A lot of these people are paid for already, or they got money backing them, that they can't deviate from those ideals, you know. So,
and I think even with leaders, we don't need to look that far. I'm looking at what Malika is doing now, and look at what Norm Daniels has done, you know, for us, you know, paving the way for certain things, and the fact we give them back. I think we don't realize that the heroes are like right here among us, you know, doing some really important stuff. I'm just thinking about John, and your father and my father, your mother and my father, the way they were educators in Plainfield, New Jersey. They would, if they walk down the block, they've got probably more respect than some of these entertainers and some of these athletes, because of the fact of what they contributed to the neighborhood. And I think it's like to your point, John, it's like, yeah, we can, for those who do well with like leading and you know, that's their strong point. Yeah, let's make sure we hold them accountable for doing those things. For those, like I said, brother cats, who just don't have that, don't get in their way. Don't get in the way. But I think we also need to make sure that there's like multiple representations of leaders and heroes that we aspire to be like, because I think all the stuff that we have to go through on a day-to-day basis just to keep our sanity is really to make sure somebody else has it better than we do, or we did. So I think we also need to make sure we recognize the true soldiers and folks right here on this call and in the community as well. So
awesome. Did did we leave out anybody today in the discussion? Was there anybody who you all were thinking about and did not see that maybe I can go do some research on, or somebody that maybe came into your head as we were talking?
Well, y- I'm not answering that question, but I was also looking at some of the statements that Lori was making in the chat about sometimes they're just leading by being who they are, by being the professional athlete that they are. Because it's showing people, it's breaking a lot of stereotypes about greatness and what greatness may look like. So just being there is that is a form of activism. But taking it a step further, connecting it to what I said earlier, if we all look within ourselves first to see what are we doing to make things better for us, then I think that's when we start connecting. And then we're not necessarily putting so much pressure on one or two people, you know, where they are in a vulnerable position where, you know, you put people up too high or so high, they are vulnerable. And that's when people start gunning for them. That's how many of our leaders got assassinated.
That's true.
You know, even young Fred Hampton, he was just making too much noise.
At 21.
And too many people.
Yeah.
You know?
That's true. That's true. You know, Malika, what you said about sometimes, and I said this today too, about sometimes just doing you. But I remember Jay-Z saying that when he was being questioned about being more vocal when it comes to social justice, and he got kind of raked over the coals for saying, well, just being me, I'm an inspiration, right? Just being a mogul, being a great rapper that, you know, transferred it into the business world. And some people took that as arrogance. You know, when he said that, I didn't take it that way, but there were a lot of people that were saying, well, who does he think he is? Because he was saying, hey, just by doing what I'm doing, I'm an inspiration to a lot of people from the types of places I'm from, you know?
Yeah, I think somebody said it. I think Dr. Jadan Phillips said this. He said, everybody has to know what their role is or what their strengths are and what they are good at doing. And that's how they manifest their part of the struggle or fighting the struggle or being part of being an activist. Everybody can't be the more vocal one. I think even what Neftali said, he said, hey, I may not be the most vocal, but what I do, I know people are watching. So I got to watch my actions, you know. So everyone and other people got a little bit more money. So I may not be able to say a lot of things, may not be able to mobilize, but I can fund certain things to make things go. I don't need to be in the forefront. I just want to make sure the engine's going. I want to make sure everybody's happy, make sure everybody's fed. And that's what actually happened during the civil rights era. There were a lot of financiers who you may not have known actually helped out with some of these soup kitchens when people were protesting. Somebody needed to buy the tents. Somebody needed to buy those big pots, and somebody needed to cook. So there were all people part of that struggle or fighting against the struggle, but you just never knew their names. So I think it's important that we redefine, not just for the athletes, but I think for ourselves, what does it mean to be active? What does it mean to protest? What does it mean to demonstrate? And where do you fit in? And I think we're at the point right now, sad to say, that we have to ask that question, like, what can I do? Because there's some folks forming up right now that stormed the Capitol that are kind of regrouping, and there's little pockets of these little fiefdoms coming up. So not to scare anybody, but we have to really be more vigilant and more cognizant of what's happening out there, because it's some new rules starting to form up right now. So
very true. I work right up the street from the Capitol, Jarvis, right up the street, right around the corner. So my mind is always on it now. When we go back to work, looking over my shoulder, left and right, because it's getting real. Yeah,
I agree. I mean, it's definitely it's a real time for sure. But you know, when you were talking about who came to mind, you know, it wasn't an athlete, but Sam Cooke. I don't know if you mentioned. I got you know in a little late, but it reminds me of like somebody we should admire the way he laid it down as an entertainer, and a background funder, and was like, you guys put this. I think he told, if I'm not mistaken, somebody, doctor can correct me, but he told Malcolm and Martin, if you guys come together, I'll fund the whole movement.
Wow.
But I think they got word of. I think they got word of that he was behind the scenes pulling those strings, and he mysteriously, was killed earlier or died. So
yeah.
Mhm.
But that's what we talk about when we talk about the consequences in this presentation. Sometimes there's consequences in, are you willing to risk it all? And sometimes when you're in high places and you want to step out there, you have to be willing to risk it all. And I don't blame some who aren't willing to risk it all. We talked about Michael Jordan. Do we have a Michael Jordan if he came out and said some of the things we wanted him to say in the 80s? Is he still as financially successful? Some people aren't willing to risk it all. And there was a time, because athletes are doing it more now, but there was a time, I want to say early 2000s or 90s, where athletes weren't speaking up about anything. Like everything was about brand, managing your brand, no athletes were speaking up about anything. It was a short little period, but now it's gotten so bad that everybody's speaking up now, right? But there was a time where a lot of athletes, we were asking the question, like, where are these guys? Who's going to stand up? Who's going to say something? Norman, you raised your hand.
Yeah, when you mentioned Sam Cooke, the person that comes to mind is Harry Belafonte.
Yes.
Basically he was financing the King family, but yet he was always in the background. You would see him, but he didn't say much. I mean, now he's more verbal today than back then, but he was a man that was quiet, but was very powerful.
Yes. Any hip hop artists?
I believe Brother Tupac really set the example as far as somebody who represented all factions. I mean, he wasn't perfect, and he showed us how not to be perfect in front of everybody. And he said, I might misquote him. He said, if I don't change the world, I'm gonna light the flame. I'm gonna spark the mind that will come behind me and will. So, he did that in a lot of ways. A lot of these activists, entertainers coming up and representing like they are today.
Kendrick Lamar comes to mind right now and I'm wondering, is he old school now? Because I don't even know. Like, is he? I want to call him new school, but he might be getting to the old school range, because he's been out a good 10 years now. But he's one of my favorite rappers from this era, because of some of the things that he talks about and the things that he stands for, and not afraid to kind of go out on a limb, if you want to call it that.
I know I might be talking about old school. I said KRS-One.
Oh yeah, no doubt.
And I still got the original Blueprint album before Jay-Z had it. He had a album called Blueprint, and thank you, Brother Russell. And it was actually giving history lessons about like true origins of blackness and where we come from. And there was a song called You Must Learn.
Yes, I remember that song. Yeah.
And then even when we was talking about police brutality, he would say officer, overseer, officer. Yeah, you already know it now. Yeah.
That was classic. I don't even think I knew what was going on back then when he was saying it. As I got older, I respected it even more.
And if y'all could look up the cover for KRS-One's the Blueprint, he's actually on a stoop pointing up where our officer is like standing over him. So he's like defiant, like looking at him like, yo, you're not gonna, it's like, it's this picture right here. And he has on shades. And it's like, this is total black dominance, like black protests, black rebellion. And the image was still like stuck. I still got the record somewhere. Yes, I have a record. Yes, wax. About this long.
You know what I wanted to add, being that you say hip hop and maybe look at the history of hip hop, that we can't have a discussion without mentioning Gil Scott-Heron and the Last Poets and their impact on how things are going. So, you know, as a new school person, I only read about them. I really don't know about them, but I think that if you look at hip hop the way it is, you cannot do anything without mentioning them, or even Nina Simone.
Mm.
The Last Poets, one of my mentors put me up on them. I want to say I was in my 20s. I didn't know who they were. And when I heard, I could not believe I didn't know who they were for years. I was ashamed of myself. They're phenomenal. Yeah, that's Last Poets. And anybody on here who's never listened to that, check it out. Check it out. That's like timeless stuff, you know.
You know, I was also thinking about the hip hop artists, and some people were quieted, I think, because they were too positive. You know, they just didn't. There wasn't enough money to. They was like, there's no money in that, so they weren't supported, but they were still putting out positive music with messages.
Give me an example.
You know, there's always.
Let me think
what is it? I mean, even what is that? Potholes in my lawn.
You talk De La Soul?
De La Soul, you know, there's I can't think of them now, but there was this movement when we were going in from gold to black medallions.
Oh, Dead Presidents,
X-Clan,
yeah. And
Dead Press.
Like,
what
was that?
Dead Press.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Okay.
So, I think that's also when you talk about the price of standing up, the price of having a message, and you see that there's a lot of nonsense that's in that's getting the main play now. You know, it's about shaking butt and making money but there are artists out there that are saying something different, but I just don't think they're supported.
They're not in the mainstream. Whereas when we were coming up, there were different genres, and they were all in the mainstream. If you wanted to listen to Biggie and some gangster rap, that was on the radio. If you wanted to listen to Tupac, that was on the radio. If you wanted to listen to KRS-One, that was on the radio. But at some point, it just became where one type of rap was on the radio. Well, before you could pick, you get some Queen Latifah, and that's not because I don't want to sound like a hip hop hater, right? Because sometimes you can come off as sounding like an angry hip hop hater, because a lot of the young folk will say, well, yeah, that's because y'all talking about radio. They say we don't listen to the radio no more. We download everything, and there's all kind of underground music that you don't even know where it's at. And somebody told me that one time, and I was like, oh, I felt real small. And they say, yeah, it's about radio. You don't know how to find the underground hip hop artists. And I was like, okay, I'm sorry. You know, so there is there's some good hip hop now too that's conscious. It's just not mainstream, and maybe we got to go and look for it, you know.
Yeah. Ness has his hand up.
Somebody raise his hand.
Ness Tyler has his hand up.
Yeah, and I think just to your point though too, I think that's part of the problem, right? I think, you know, as a generation too, is like we're supporting the wrong at times. You know, if you listen to some of the music that's being played, and even my daughters, you know, at times when I'm making my business to try to get involved in anything they're listening to, and I'm like, hold on, like, no, you're not listening to a Cardi B or some of the language and the stuff that's being played now though too is listen, from a personal standpoint, I don't agree with it, but I also think we don't give those individuals who are talking about some of those groups you guys were mentioning, we don't give them the light that they should have, because we tend to support some of these other artists who are talking about.
Is it we or is it the record labels? Because
but listen, but when I mean we though too, I think, and I don't mean you guys in particular, but us as a generation too, we're buying those records, right? And we're supporting those record labels to continue to play. We're supporting those radio stations to continue to play that music. So I think we also burden that responsibility too, which goes back to my other point is that I think, you know, at the end of the day, when it comes to activism, we all need to look at ourselves in the mirror and ask ourselves every single day, you know, what am I doing to be the best version of myself today, and ask yourself that every single day. But if we don't do that, then how are we going to make this better? Because we cannot continue to rely on just those individuals who are in the mainstream, those athletes we're talking about. I think all of us, and to Jarvis' point, I think we could make that difference. And there are individuals within our own local communities that are making a difference. But what am I doing to support that person too? But until we don't do that as a generation, as a group, and be real with ourselves and look ourselves in the mirror, I think we're going to be, we're going to continue to slowly move that pendulum. It'll be better if we can, do a little faster. But again, it's I think we burden some of that responsibility too, though.
Well, that's a good segue, because I wanted to at least, if I'm going to do all this talking, and can you guys see the screen?
Yes.
Okay. I wanted to at least, before we leave, let you guys know what I'm doing, because if I'm going to talk and talk about all these athletes, I wanted to at least let you guys know some of the things that I'm doing, so you don't think I'm just out here to talk, because talk is cheap. I don't look like that anymore. I'm looking, my wife was looking at this picture the other day. She was like, oh, remember when you used to have a cut or muscles? Now I'm like, struggling to get 5 pounds down. But a few things that I'm doing, and I consider this activism. I'm doing a lot of work now with the Villanova University Black Alumni Association. And we're trying to do, we're establishing things like mentoring programs for the students and helping student athletes engage with their community. Obviously, right now, with so much going on with COVID, we're not able to be there physically, but we're trying to do some things for the Black student athletes on campus because they're having some problems. And some of those problems are the same problems I had 20 years ago at Villanova University, the predominantly white school. And so we're trying to do as best we can, to help those students, help to improve their experience on campus. So 20 years later, they're coming back just like I'm trying to do now, and helping the ones that come after them. And I'm also a board member on Voices for Children Montgomery here in Montgomery County, Maryland, which is a, it's a nonprofit organization that advocates for children in the foster care system. And most of those children that we're working with are Black and brown children here in the DMV area, Montgomery County to be exact. So not to toot my own horn, but I just wanted to let you guys know that I'm doing some things as well. And it's not just talk, but we got to get as many people out there, giving back and doing some things in the community as we can. So that, did I stop sharing?
Yeah, no,
Okay.
You're still sharing.
I'm still sharing the meat. You would think we would know how to work all of this stuff now. Go ahead, Malika.
No, I was going to say that I'm glad you led off on that point. What am I doing? Because
Yes.
then I would say that that's a question that we all should be asking ourselves. What am I doing? Am I doing something to be, again, part of the solution? Because we only have a certain amount of time on this earth.
Yeah.
So what do you want to be remembered for?
Right.
What legacy do you want to leave behind? And I have this ring on it constantly that says we must be the change we wish to see in the world. Mm-hmm. So I'm glad you left off on that slide. What am I doing? And for everyone that's left here, I ask you to ask yourself that. And encourage others that you see complaining. They have a lot of energy to complain. Like, let's try to, conjugate that energy into something a little bit more productive, and do something instead of just saying something. So I'm just glad that you left off with that slide, and I thank you for your entire presentation and your willingness to be here tonight.
Thank you for having me. This was great. It just re-energized me, invigorating. And I really appreciate you just for having me and let me be a part of the conversation.
Thank you. You're getting applause.
Oh, thank you. Thank you.
Applause.
Thank you, everyone.
If I can, I just want to remind people to please put your, take a moment to complete the feedback form that I put in the chat. If there aren't any other questions or comments, anyone?
Leave my email address for anybody that wants to reach out. Throw that in the chat as well.
You know, brother, that's awesome. That's awesome. Thank you for that. That says a lot. I just thank you everyone for being here tonight and being a part of this series from Whence We Came. These kind of conversations are important to continue. And I encourage you to continue to have them within your community. And please make sure that you know, if I can encourage you to have these kind of conversations with cross communities, because this is the kind of conversation that should be shared with everyone, because we all should be a part of the solution. So I'm gonna step off of my soapbox now, and just thank you everyone.
Thank you, Malika.
Thank you, Malika. Yeah.
Be kind to
Brother
yourself.
John.
Thank you very much.
Yo, bro, I'm gonna reach out to you this weekend, man.
Please do. Please do.
Catch up. Yes, sir.
Yeah, we gotta catch up, Jarvis.
All right, man.
All right now.
Thanks,
Have a good night, everybody.
Good night, everybody.
Everybody.
Good night.